Welcome to Business Talk. I'm George O'Brien, filling in for Joe Bednar. We have a very exciting show for you today. We have the recently announced new president and CEO of the Western Mass Economic Development Council. He is Aaron Vega. Aaron, happy to have you with us today.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Good to be with you. Almost feels like one of ours. You were a 40 under 40 winner in 2010. We've had some 40 under 40 winners go on to some great jobs. This might be the best of the best, as they say. Like I said, one of ours has made it.
Yeah.
So that announcement just came down this week.
Yeah.
I imagine your phone and email are blowing up. What's the most interesting call, email you've had? Who have you heard from?
Well, definitely hearing from people from across the game, people I know. Some of the people that are on the search committee. I think some of the most, the ones I want to follow up the most on, I guess I would say, is the congratulations from any of the staff and admin over at UMass. So definitely want to be leveraging UMass, and of course the chancellor's comments back from September mentioning that UMass needs to be the economic driver for Western Mass. So put a pin in that one for sure, and definitely want to follow up with him on that. So definitely want to be following up with UMass. And that's
my alma mater, so you definitely follow up.
Okay, there you go.
So let's go back several months to when Rick Sullivan announced that he would be stepping down. He left the region with plenty of time.
Yeah.
Was this something that you knew as soon as you saw that announcement that you wanted to pursue? Did you need to be talked into this, recruited? Did someone say, hey, Aaron, you need to do? How did that go?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was a little surprised, because I work with Rick, so I didn't have any inclination that he was leaving. But he'd been there for 11 years. In this track and this sort of work that I'm doing, that all of us, in this economic development world down here in Western Mass, there's only a few positions, high level, that get you to stay in Western Mass and do the work that I love. So his job was definitely on my radar, but again, wasn't something I was pursuing. When he sent out the letter, two things. First, I congratulated him and said, thanks for mentioning population growth. Because that's something I've been hitting him over the head with for probably the whole time I've known him, right? We need to talk about population growth for Western Mass. But yeah, it was definitely on my radar to think about, this is probably something I should apply. And actually, it was Mayor Garcia who, turned to me and says, you're applying, right? Like, without question, So, I'm someone who likes to finish things. And the reality in this world of economic development and municipal work, nothing's ever finished, or if it is finished, there's 10 more things to do. So, I had hesitancy of leaving the city of Holyoke, right? Because there's so many great things going on, there's so many initiatives that we've started. But again, when your boss tells you should look at this other opportunity, that's definitely opens the door. Okay, so let's talk for a couple minutes. Somewhere in Rick Sullivan's desk, maybe somewhere else downstairs in the EDC, there is a job description for this particular position. Tell me, sounds like a job interview question. Tell me what your job description is. It's a broad job. There's a lot to it. What is your job description? I think there is a lot to it. I think that's the opportunity, is that this can go in a couple different directions. And I do think that, Rick has done a great job of building up the membership and building up some stability, getting a little bit more name recognition out there. I feel like this next chapter for the EDC is to look back and talk to those members and say, what can we do to help you and to help this region? A lot of my interview, I talked a lot about working with municipalities, being in a municipality now, knowing the constraints, knowing the capacity issues, and making sure that we have an ability at the EDC to talk to our municipalities if the EDC is the entry point for businesses into this area. I want to make sure that we're making those proper connections. So it's a lot of connecting, a lot of convening. I think all that's important. But it's making sure that we're giving direction to those businesses and bringing those partnerships to talk to them, so that, we know where those site-ready places are. We know where there's places for lease. We know where there's places that are welcoming to certain types of businesses, right? Some communities may not want certain types of businesses. Some are going to be open to that. Some development works in some smaller communities. Some are meant for the Holyoke, Chicopee, Springfield, Westfield. So having that lay of the land, but being able to call up, as Rick was able to, people like myself, hey, what do you have available? We want to have this meeting. We want to bring this opportunity to your city. I think that's key. How can we bring some capacity building to the municipalities to make sure that everyone's on page, ready for these businesses that are hopefully that we're going to be courting to come to Western Mass?
All right, you bring a pretty diverse resume to this job. Some cool stops along the way, a lot of different things. I could tell our listeners, why don't you give us your background here?
Sure. I think one of the interesting things is like this was not a clear path. And I always remember I talked to young people when I was state rep. I was like, whatever you're doing in your 20s is building what you're going to do in your 30s, and your 30s might build on your 40s. I didn't go to school for public planning. I didn't even know that was a thing. I wish sometimes I had, but it all worked out. So for me, my first career was actually in documentary film editing. I went to Keene State College up in New Hampshire. Got to have a class with this amazing editor called Paul Burns.
You did some Ken Burns work.
And Paul was Ken's editor, so I went and got an internship. I was one of those lucky people that, senior year, 2 months before graduation, when everyone's filling out those job applications and working on their resume, I already had something lined up. I had an internship with Ken Burns for my senior year, and they hired me right out of the gate. So I worked in documentary films for almost 15 years. I worked with Ken for about 4 years. But that experience, living in New York, living in Austin, Texas, living up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, collaborating, learning how to work together, learning how to be mission-driven, a lot of those skill sets translated over to my next career, which after I was living in New York City, moved back to Massachusetts, started getting connected with young professionals, right, quote unquote. I know there's the YPS here in Springfield, and so in Holyoke, a bunch of us sort of business owners and activists, whatever that may mean, got together and formed this group called CRUSH. And it was Citizens for the Revitalization and Urban Success of Holyoke, which is why acronyms are very good, right, because no one wants to say that 10 times. And that led me to run for city council. There was people like Rebecca Lisi, Tim Purrington, people like that run the city council, trying to have a different conversation about what the city of Holyoke could be. Then of course Alex Morse became mayor, so there's just a lot of change. And I ran for city council and won. And that's one of those things where you sort of like, oh, now what? Now what do I do now that I've won? And then of course things moved quickly, and I ran for state rep and won that, and did that for 8 years. And just that experience of understanding all the complexity, all the different things that go into being a state rep was so helpful, and again, really let me see a lot of different opportunities. Of course, I made the decision to not run in February of 2020. There was lots of opportunities on the table in February of 2020. Obviously, 2 months later, things kind of changed and everything was shut down. I was, timing Marcos Marrero, my predecessor in this role at the Economic Development and Planning Office for Holyoke, was leaving, and so I had to transition into that. And this last 5 years there has just been, again, I love being in these jobs where I learn. I got to learn about zoning and development, and got to meet these developers and meet all these different people doing different things, from small businesses to large businesses, a lot about housing development, and so understand how all the pieces work. You can't go to school and learn this stuff. It's on-the-job training. And so I think those career paths have brought me to where I am today, and this ability to sort of take this to the next level and talk about Western Mass as a whole, I think is really exciting.
Okay. You're listening to Business Talk, a podcast presented by Business West and sponsored by Greenfield Cooperative Bank. We're talking with Aaron Vega, the recently announced new president and CEO of the Western Mass Economic Development Council. Congratulations again. We're going to talk a little bit more about Holyoke in a minute. But what I want to do right now is talk about, in the announcement, they talked about a listening tour. Mm-hmm. Most people in new jobs go on a listening tour.
Right.
You don't start for a few months now. Let's talk about what happens, first of all, on that listening tour, and then what happens after the listening tour.
Yeah. So I've sort of, this is me planning this out, and again, have a lot to do in the next 2 months, but I see those first 3 quarters of 2026. So I think about the first 3 months, quarter one of 2026, thinking about how do I first meet with, the staff that's there, talk about what's working, what's not working. I want to meet with the partners. Who is actually paying to be a member, right? And what do they feel they've gotten? What do they want to get? I want to secure those memberships. Obviously, it's very important. Mm-hmm. So I think that's priority one, to talk about our members and see what are they looking for, what do they think about things that we could do. I really think I sort of put in my working sheet, January, all ideas on the table. And then the next 4 or 5 months is honing down and focusing those ideas. I think it's going to be important for us to understand what is the role of the EDC in certain things. Should we be involved in small business? I don't know. Maybe, yes. What to what degree? Are we more focused on the big businesses, 50 employees or over, right? People want to locate here. Do we have a role in housing development? I mean, everything's so much mixed use development now. I mean, do we have some role in that? And then, of course, the legislative issues we want to work on. So I think that first month or two is listening to our partners, our members, staff, people who work with the EDC now, and then start to reach out to people who aren't members, who we think should be, and why aren't you a member, and what could we entice you to become a member, right? And what's that sort of trial, that conversation? I want to reach out to, of course, the legislative delegation. That'll probably be the first meeting, Western Mass delegation, meeting up with mayors. I'd like to host, and it maybe sounds ambitious, but I think you have to go into stuff with ambition. I'd like to at least set up some, monthly kind of roundtables with different groups. I do that a lot now in my position now, so I think, the Western Mass delegation in January, probably mayors, city managers in February, and then starting to think about, people in my role, the economic development people, but also thinking about like the realtors, right? In Holyoke, we've done these realtors roundtables 2 times a year, and having that relationship between what they're hearing on the ground, more the commercial realtors, obviously, not so much the residential realtors, but what are they hearing on the ground? What information can we share? How can we help each other? And how can we, I think it's really important that we get on the same page and the same message for Western Mass. The quality of life, the opportunities, the workforce, what are the assets? And we need to all be talking the same language. So that'll be the first quarter, and I think that second quarter is starting to hone that down a little bit more, focus in on sort of maybe more stakeholder groups, smaller groups. I also have a staff to build, so there's some opportunity there. So I think in learning what people want the EDC to be and what we can do is going to inform what the staff looks like.
Okay.
And so my hope is that between that, my goal is like in September to have some kind of, again, it's not a strategic plan, I'm not rebranding. Yes, we've got to work on the website, but I don't want to just be focused on a new logo. But I think some kind of working plan coming out in September.
Okay.
Meet the new staff, here's what we heard, and here's the things we want to focus on.
All right, this might be kind of a heavy question to hit you with since you're not even starting for 3.5 months, but there was a book that came out not that long ago that talked about jobs being perhaps the most precious commodity, maybe not right now, but soon, even ahead of gold and water and everything else. People want to know where the jobs are going to come from in the years and the decades to come from. This region, kind of stagnant in a lot of its sectors right now, healthcare, education, manufacturing. Where are the jobs going to come from in the years ahead? You've already seen some of this in Holyoke, some of the sectors that Rick Sullivan mentions. He talks about quantum computing and food science and green energy. I mean, you were right there for a lot of this in Holyoke. Where are the jobs going to come from, and how do we get those jobs?
I think 2 things. First, I think it's securing the jobs we have, right? So everyone talks about business retention being key, right? So I think that even in the interview process, listening to some of the board members, there seems to be a little bit more like we need to shore up our local groups, right? So starting local and then going out regionally. So making sure that our current businesses are staying here and hopefully growing here. In fact, we have a company that has offices both in Holyoke and in Chicopee, great company, AM Litho, and they're expanding, right? And they're buying a second building in Holyoke. So we want to see that happen, right? So how do we keep this company that has jobs in Chicopee and in Holyoke, keep them here, right? Important to keep them here. I think it's going to be 2 things. Well, first, I think it's leaning into those entrepreneurs and those startups that are coming out of places like UMass, out of Greentown Labs in Somerville, the BIC, the Engine, those places. Companies like Clean Crop and Sublime that have a track record of locating here. A couple of great companies up in Deerfield and Greenfield area that have also come out of that, out of those systems. And so how do we make sure that those businesses, those startups that are coming out of UMass particularly, that are utilizing our resources as a state, those incentives that they maybe have to be in these programs, that they're, when they come out, that they're located in Western Mass. I think that's key. Smaller businesses that are going to grow. So that's the first one. The second one, so I think that's the first one, is how we get, those are going to create new jobs, probably in those sectors, right? Green tech, hard tech, food science, probably energy. So I think that offers a lot of opportunity for us in Western Mass. The second one I think is, if there are larger companies out there, I think there's 2 tracks on this, the larger companies. I think first it's a conversation with our friends over at the Boston Chamber. When big companies in Boston are looking for their R&D or looking to manufacture their prototypes, they need to make sure that they're looking at Western Mass, because we have the companies that can do that. So creating that connection between Boston and Western Mass, I think, is always going to be something we want to work on. And then courting businesses, I know the state's, gotten some companies that have left Connecticut and other places, and sometimes it's a negative impact actually to Western Mass when they take a company out of Northern Connecticut because a lot of our people work there. But how do we entice other companies if they're looking to relocate or expand? What do we offer in Western Mass, right? So if we talk about the workforce, we talk about education, we talk about the programs, what are we doing to entice those businesses to look at Western Mass? So I do imagine at some point there'll be the local building, the regional, and at some point we need to be out there marketing Western Mass. Now, is that solely the role of the EDC? I'm sure there'll be some partnerships there, but we do need to put together a good package of why companies should locate in Western Mass.
Okay. We only have a couple of minutes left, and we could talk about population growth for a couple of hours,
Yes.
probably. But you did bring it up earlier. It is a subject that's on everybody's minds here in Springfield and Holyoke, but especially in places like Greenfield and Berkshire County.
Right, yes.
How does a region like this grow its population? Where do we even start?
Well, I think, again, if you wanted to talk about one of the sectors we want to lean into, right, so food science. And I think that's one of these big topics, right? So I used to call it food economy, right? So that dealt with everything from, food insecurity programs to restaurants and businesses to the food sciences, right? So the advancements in food preservation and advancement. I think we need to really be talking about a local food economy that grows more food locally. That's how we get Franklin County involved, right? That's how we get our farmers involved in the economic growth of Western Mass. So I do think that there's been a big push for that sort of grow local movement. So that's one way that we grow jobs. Population, I think that every city and town, we need to have a goal. I know Wayfinders has been doing a lot of work on this. Let's just say a number. Let's say if we said that Western Mass wants to grow in the next 20 years by 10,000 people. Well, then what does that mean for everybody? That gives us a roadmap to work backwards from. That means, okay, Holyoke, Springfield, Chicopee, Westfield, you all need to start thinking about having, 500, 1,000, 1,500 units of housing coming online in the next 10 years, right? For the smaller communities, it's 10 units of housing in the next 10 years, right? Everyone has to play a role. So that's what I'm saying. If everyone in Western Mass agreed, because it's going to be hard to agree upon a lot of things, so we got to find the few things we can all agree upon, right? So population growth is important to everybody. Retaining our young people here, they got to have the jobs to go to. So what do we need to do? And housing is the big linchpin. I mean, it's talked about everywhere we go. Whether it's people who are making good money who can't afford to find a house, people who are low income who can't find housing, people are moving to this area and they're living 45 minutes, an hour away. We want to make sure that people have those opportunities locally. So I think that something like housing development is going to be key in the population growth. How do we keep, and again, if you think about all those companies coming out of UMass, if we kept 10% of those companies locally, that could help build our economy and our population. So I do think they're hand in hand, because again, as companies come, I've had meetings with companies that you think they're going to go and talk about taxes and maybe workforce, and they're talking about housing and the entertainment for their employees, right? So that's the things that businesses want to come to where things are happening. Right? They want to be in these hubs. They want to be next to entertainment for their employees. They want to be around where other people, if they have to grow, there's going to be a workforce ready for them. So if we have those assets, we need to be marketing them.
Okay. We could go on for hours, but we have reached the end of our time.
Okay.
Thank you again for coming on.
Absolutely.
We will have to have you back in about 6 months by the end of the listening tour and listen to what you have to say.
Sounds good.
Thank you again, and congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you to all of you for listening in. This is Business Talk, a broadcast presented by Business West and sponsored by Greenfield Cooperative Bank. I'm George O'Brien, filling in for Joe Bednar. We'll see you next time.